online, and then we'll get started.
Good to go.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks again, as always, for sticking with us through this year. This group has been amazing, and I really appreciate you. We have a lot on the agenda to talk about today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started pretty quickly. If you were able to tune into the board meeting, that's great. You might have seen some of what I'm going to present, so I'm going to move pretty quickly through some of this information. I want to first and foremost start by saying the administrative team for about a month in anticipation of new guidance coming out from the CDC has actually been talking through what it might look like if we could reduce our distancing from 6 feet, because really the obstacle to getting more kids into our buildings has been the 6 foot distancing. And I think everyone's aware of that. We've talked about it a lot. So these conversations we've been having as an admin team with our teachers union, executive board. We talked with our board and community this week, and now have talked with both faculties at faculty meetings yesterday. So the conversation and planning is underway. But as you may or may not know, the CDC guidance didn't quite go as far as we thought it would. In substantial community transmission, they're still recommending 6 feet. In the 2 lower levels of community transmission, they are suggesting social distancing as much as possible. So it was a little bit surprising to us to see, but we're continuing to talk about what we might be able to do once our teachers are vaccinated. So we'll go through some of that today. So again, we have, as a group, this group, you know this, our decision-making has been always had students and staff safety and well-being at the top of the list. Social emotional health, and then academic achievement and growth, all these pieces. Equity for students, regardless of whether they're at home or at school. Continuity and consistency for kids who need to be in and out and staff who need to be in and out. And obviously support for our community. So what we presented were some considerations for possible shifts to our plan. So the challenge is we would like to get more students in school for whom remote learning is not working at home or in school, and to try to transition to more live in-person or face-to-face instruction when possible. And 6 feet is really the biggest challenge. We know that 6 feet has been a scientifically based recommendation. We know that it lowers potential transmission and minimizes the close contacts in our building. And logistically, how that helps us keeping kids 6 feet apart is that logistically, when a student is positive in the building, we don't have to quarantine a bunch of people around that student, because 6 feet apart means they're not close contacts by definition. If you go in between the 3 to 6 feet, now anyone in that 6 foot bubble becomes a close contact and will need to quarantine for 14 days. So the 6 feet has not only helped us keep transmission down, it's also helped us to minimize the quarantining for kids. Here's the new CDC chart. We're in the orange. So that's where we are with that. Does everyone agree that 6 feet is necessary? No. Most US public health agencies agree that 6 feet is beneficial for limiting community spread. There are some organizations who have said that 6 feet is not necessarily the magic number. And when you're weighing the risks that we have of keeping kids out of school, there are some places saying, 6 feet doesn't need to be adhered to as strictly as we have been. So what would it look like if we decided to reduce those distances? We would be able to increase the number of students. There would also be more close contacts, which means more quarantines and more use of our remote learning platform. We are in low transmission at this point. We keep hearing from the community or the health department that this variant is really scary and we're going to get more cases. We're not there yet, but if we do get cases, we know for sure that we will be quarantining more students. So what challenges would still exist if we decide to reduce the distancing and bring in more kids? Well, one of the things is that, we were very transparent with the community at the beginning of this year that remote would be the platform, whether they're in or out. And we do have a group of parents that made their decision to keep their student home based on just that, the equity between the two platforms, and that they knew that if they sent them to school, it wouldn't be that much different than keeping them home. And so they made an agreement to keep their kids home for the year. And I, have heard from parents that's something that's really important to them. So the landscape would potentially change on those families if we decide to bring in more students. We will still need a remote option. That is a mandate from our State Board of Education. And we'll need it because it's good for kids. When they're out for 14 days, there are some districts that do not offer a remote option when a student is out. Sometimes, so if there are two separate programs, there are some districts that they run it where if you're in person and you chose that option, but you have to be out, then you're out for 14 days. You don't get switched over into the remote school. We didn't want to do that. We really wanted to give parents an option to feel safe and comfortable keeping their kids going with school through any kind of quarantine and closure. And honestly, some of our parents have taken advantage of it even for travel and vacations. And it's hard on our teachers to handle both in and out, but we have made that available all year, and many of our parents have taken advantage of that. As you know, this group in particular, transportation and arrivals and dismissals, has been an issue for us. It'll create some more challenges if we bring some more kids in terms of either adding buses or adding cars to, our transportation. There is a potential for some teacher shifts in some grade levels at elementary if we bring in more kids, because right now our classes are not balanced. They are balanced for the learning model, either remote or hybrid, or, we're kind of balanced based on that, but the numbers are not equal in every grade, in every class. And so if we do invite in more kids and more come in, there is the potential for teacher changes. If this variant, the additional variants come to Lake County or Lake Bluff, because we would be in closer contact, there is potential for more large scale shifting to remote. If we see there's spread in the school or spread in the community, or we just are short staffed, the remote is going to be a part of our program for a while. We don't know what the impact of those variants are going to be. But we also know there's risks to maintaining what we're doing now. We know that remote's really difficult for some of our kids in school and out of school. It's hard for them to handle. So we get that. And it is, utilizing that Zoom platform is limiting in terms of how we can deliver our best practice. So it's not a perfect system that we have now either. So in terms of, what that means for us as a district, and this was more of a board conversation, not every agency is coming up to speed as quickly as we'd like them to with, helping us to do this and get more kids in. Insurance is an issue, liability could be an issue. Those are things that we have to think through in terms of making sure that our organization feels comfortable with going against a piece of guidance. So what we've been considering is planning to move to a model where maybe 6 feet is not guaranteed, but that we would distance kids to the greatest extent possible and potentially invite more students back to learning with us after spring break, at which point we should be fully staffed. We still are trying to hire some positions at LBES. And the majority of our teachers who want to be vaccinated have had the opportunity to be fully vaccinated. And we're working on that. We're getting there. And our teachers, have all been going through the Lake County pods. I just got my first shot last night. So we're getting there. So those are our considerations. I did talk a little bit about that remote learning piece. That's going to be with us for a little while. And, to be honest, there are some great things that have come out of utilizing a remote system. We were just on talking about parent-teacher conferences. We had a lot of increased participation this year because our parents could Zoom in from work or didn't need childcare. Those families that don't have a car were able to participate with us. We know that remote option has offered a lot of flexibility for our staff and families and students this year, and we're mandated to do it until further notice. So remote is going to be a part of students' days for a while. So if we're going to do this, what might it look like? And I'm going to give our principals an opportunity to talk at this point, not only about what they're considering, but even a little bit about what it does look like now so that people have some context. Because those folks who haven't been in person might not know exactly how it looks. And those who have been in person might not know how it looks at every grade. LBES has because they have a little bit more flexibility with keeping students with the same teacher for the majority of the day, has been able to make some adjustments throughout the year based on student needs, based on the age and developmental level, based on the teachers who could be in or the teachers who needed to be out. Their program has kind of morphed a little bit as the year has gone on, and certainly did at trimester 2. Middle school really has stayed pretty strictly to the model that we envisioned at the beginning of the year, and is anticipating some different kinds of shifts. So I want to give each principal an opportunity to kind of just briefly describe what's happening now and what we might be considering for the future. Kelly, you want to start?
Sure, I would be happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I would love to give a run through of what in-person looks like at LBES. And due to the reasons that Lisa mentioned, there are nuances or differences between each of our grade levels. So I have kind of a quick summary for each grade level just to help those that are watching, parents at home, and even staff members at middle to understand what in-person looks like for each of our grade levels. So at the pre-kindergarten level for our 3-year-olds in the morning and our 4-year-olds in the afternoon, they are using what I'm terming the blended model. So we have students that are in the classroom in person and students who are at home that are part of the same class participating in the learning that's delivered through their teachers. So students are at home, they are in person. All students participate in the instruction via Zoom. There are times when students log off in person here at school and then also in their homes, and they engage in centers activities. So there are times when they are in the classroom participating in centers, and they have materials that are not shared. So it's all planned out and organized before the day begins, and students are able to be away from the iPad and participate in those opportunities. They do gather for instruction frequently throughout their couple hours of the day. They have snack and chat through Zoom, and services are also delivered via Zoom for pre-K. At the kindergarten level, we do have we have 3 full in-person sections at this grade level. So 3 of the classes are in person, 2 of the classes are fully remote. The in-person teachers deliver instruction directly to students for a majority of the day at the kindergarten level. So they are not delivering the instruction through the iPad. We have found that this helps us when it comes to engagement and motivation at the kindergarten level. If a student is home due to COVID-related reasons at the kindergarten level, they are logging into Seesaw, and the teachers have prepared activities and learning for the day for our kindergartners. At the first grade level, we have in-person sections here in the building as well. So there are 2 in-person sections and there are 2 remote sections. The in-person first grade teachers deliver instruction directly to the students for a majority of the day at the first grade level. Again, this is related to not only, these are really large, they are some of the largest classrooms in our school. And so being able to deliver that instruction directly with students does support the motivation and engagement at this grade level. I think it's worth noting that if a student is home due to COVID-related reasons, they need to be remote. They do shift and log in with our fully remote sections at the first grade level. Part of this is due to the large size of those in-person classes. At the second grade level, we have in-person sections. We have 3 fully in-person sections. There are some hybrid situations happening here. And we have 2 blended classes at the second grade level. So all of our second grade teachers are here in the building. For 3 of them, they have larger sections of students here in the building. The blended ones have a smaller number of students in person and larger number of students at home. At the second grade level, the majority of instruction this year has been delivered via Zoom through the device. For our blended sections, it is always occurring via Zoom. It's important to note that due to some network and internet challenges, our full in-person sections have had the teacher deliver instruction directly to the students, while the hybrid students or the learners that are at home are logging in via Zoom. So just the students at home are logging in via Zoom, and the teacher is teaching to them, but they're teaching directly to the students in the room, not always through the device. At the second grade level, the classrooms are full. So there's not a lot of space. This means that movement in the classroom is minimal, which means that the breakout rooms are incredibly helpful to allow students to meet directly with the teacher and allow them to meet with one another. At times, if students are sitting near each other, they might work together, but they're staying at their desk and not moving around the room to buddy or partner up for any of that thinking work. At the third grade level, we have in-person and we have 2 in-person sections, 1 blended section, and 1 fully remote section at this grade level. For the in-person sections, instruction is through the device via Zoom. If students are sitting near each other, they might work together, but they are always staying at their desks. So the majority of instruction at the third grade level comes through the device. At the fourth grade level, we have in-person sections. We have 2 in-person sections, 3 in-person sections and 1 blended section. Instruction is through the device via Zoom for a majority of the day at the fourth grade level. If a student sits near their partner or someone that they might be working with, they may work together, but they are staying at their desks in most cases. In one of these sections, the classroom is also full, and so there's minimal space to be moving about the room. I think at times, if they can speak directly to students, they do, but it's challenging because most of the time there is a student remote from home for a variety of reasons. At the fifth grade level, all sections at this grade level consist of blended classes. So you have your in-person students who are in person 5 days a week, possibly hybrid, and students who are remote from home. Instruction at the fifth grade level is through the device via Zoom. I would say at the fifth grade level, similar to the second grade level, due to some network and internet challenges, our in-person students have had the teacher deliver some instruction directly to the students, while the remote students at home are logged in via Zoom. Our fifth grade classrooms are also quite full and there's not a lot of space. So movement in these classrooms is minimal, and breakout rooms have been helpful to allow students to meet directly with one another and their teacher. If students are sitting close to someone, they might work together, but they do remain in their desks. I would just also add that we are continuing to have families travel or be remote for a variety of reasons, and reasons other than COVID related. So Zoom does need to be on in many of our classrooms to allow these learners access to instruction. And it does inhibit or limit the teacher's ability to teach directly to students if that were to be an option. That is my summary of our in-person, what in-person is looking like at each of our grade levels at this time.
Right. And I appreciate you going through that, Kelly. And so those adjustments, like I said, have been made based on parent choice to come back or not come back and be remote, based on some of what our staff needs in terms of being home or being at school in terms of their medical concerns or issues. And so we have had to adjust for each grade a little bit differently. And what I want to say about this is that, as you can imagine in that 5-minute summary, a lot of work, a lot of talk, a lot of planning has gone into the best way to do this year for each of our students. And I would say it's extraordinary to think through each of these pieces. And I know how much work it's taken and how much time it's taken with parents and teachers and administrators to work together to create the best situation in each grade based on what parents are choosing. And so I thank you for that. And at the elementary level, what we're looking at is, again, trying to tailor this to what parents are looking to have happen and what they would be interested in if we were to shift to a model that was less than 6 feet. And so a survey will be going out next week to find out how many of our elementary families would want to come back, given that if we have more coming in, some of these things will shift again. The model may shift a little bit, how much Zoom may shift a little bit. There might be teacher shifts. And so we'll be trying to find out what the parents at the elementary school will be looking to have happen so that we can start to plan to accommodate as much of that as we can. Nate, do you want to go through yours?
Sure, and I'll do the quick summary of what it looks like now, and some highlights of what it might look like if we were to move forward. As a reminder, at the middle school, obviously we have a schedule in which typically kids would move through the building and go from class to class, and so there's some unique challenges that don't exist at the elementary level. The way that we've done this is to have our in-person students come in, go to one room specifically, and they are accessing all of their classes remotely, just as our students that are working from home are doing. Students in a given classroom are following their own unique schedules, and so at any given time, they're in a variety of different classes. They're not all in the same class at the same time. We've had basically 3 classrooms per grade level. So we've got 3 rooms of 7th grade, 3 rooms of 8th grade, 3 rooms of 6th. And the way in which that supervision piece has worked is that our staff members that are not teaching live synchronous instruction have been assigned to those in-person classrooms to be the facilitator, the supervisor, the person helping to redirect and support the kids that are in person. That is occurring when they are delivering their instruction asynchronously. And for everyone except math teachers right now, that's an every other day scenario. One day live sync instruction, the next day asynchronous instruction, with the exception of our fine arts folks who made a shift into this phase 2 to also be available to help facilitate so that our math teachers can teach synchronously every day. One of the things that I definitely have heard from staff and from students and from families is a desire to move toward something that provides more synchronous instruction, something that perhaps enables kids to be together in a space in the same class at the same time, and perhaps just again increasing our student contact time. So what Mr. Jackson and I did at our faculty meeting last night was to provide a framework for which we think that we could move to a scenario that achieves many of those goals. There are a couple of, I think, really important things to highlight. We would consider having our students, instead of being assigned to one room, coming to school at the same time that they're coming now, and then progressing through their schedule, but actually going to the classrooms where the teachers are teaching. So they will be then in a classroom with peers who are in the class at the same time. One of the logistical challenges to moving in that direction is that we would not be able to maintain the hybrid scenario that exists now. In other words, we have students that are coming in on Mondays and Wednesdays, and other students that are coming in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll spare you the details, but the logistics of that are unmanageable and make it impossible for us to move into a scenario where we're offering synchronous instruction for all classes every day. That's what we would be talking about. We would be eliminating the asynchronous piece. A student would travel through the building, following their schedule, and going to the class where the teacher is teaching. Now, depending upon how many parents elect to stay fully remote or go in person, what that classroom instruction looks like is gonna vary. In most cases, a student would be in a classroom, again, probably on the live platform, or perhaps observing on a projection of the class, while those at home are also accessing the instruction at the same time via the Zoom platform. So you've got teachers who are gonna perhaps be doing both at the same time. Now, if we have a small enough number of kids that choose to stay home, we might look to cluster group those in such a way that not every single class is done in a streaming in-person fashion, but be able to have some classes done that way and other classes that are not. Regardless of whether you're a kid who would be coming in person or a student who would be staying home, there is the possibility that we would need to make adjustments to their schedules in order to fit the kids in the class, maintain as much of a social distance as we possibly can. So I want to be clear about that. I do think probably the biggest shift is this idea that if you have a student who is currently here 2 days a week, you're going to have to make a decision about whether you want them in a full 5 or home a full 5. When we looked at possibilities, and I think many of you have looked at other school districts and know that Their models include either half-day in-person instruction and half-day at home, or perhaps 2 days in person, 2 days at home. For our families who have had their students in 5 days a week all year long, it didn't feel like a step forward to suddenly say, you're now going to be in a 2-day-a-week scenario so that we can bring more kids in person. That seemed to us to be a non-negotiable. So we didn't look down that avenue very far. We still are committed to offering the best possible remote instruction that we can. One of the things that is occurring, it started this morning and will continue today, tomorrow, and then into next week, is the more detailed conversations with our teams. So for those that don't know, we have common plan time for our academic teams at each grade level. We have common plan time for our student services team, and we have common plan time for our fine arts team. Mr. Jackson and I are working closely with those teams to solicit feedback and input, to really figure out kind of what details need to be addressed to make this work. I've already had conversations with Mr. Khan. Obviously, if we have more students coming in, we also possibly have more students requiring transportation. So those are scenarios that have to be worked through as well. But I'm excited to say that we've got staff who are very talented and have a great eye for what our middle school model looks like, and are committed to making adjustments that are in the best interest of teaching and learning.
Thanks, Nate. And I'm going to apologize right now because we're going to need to extend our meeting past the half an hour so we can have some discussion. If people need to hop off, I understand. But I want to offer an opportunity for anybody to talk through any thoughts or feelings they're having at this point about what we're thinking.
Sorry, can I add one more thing that I forgot, Lisa?
Yes.
Shifting to this next phase that we've just described also perpetuates far less flexibility in our schedule. In other words, the ability for a student to shift in and out because of quarantine or because of travel becomes less. It's also more challenging for us to adjust to teacher absences in the event that a teacher has to be out, because everybody's teaching synchronously every day. And so the likelihood of disruption to our in-person would increase, in my opinion. But I also, I just wanted to be transparent about that. Those are all things we're considering.
Thanks.
I'll go if no one else is. So you mentioned, Dr. Leali, that a survey will be coming out, and obviously there's a lot of context around this next decision making. So I think this is a critical return to learn. What's the thought in giving people the right context before answering that? And then my second question is, within that survey, will there also be an opportunity for feedback about the type of instruction? It sounds like there's a lot of strides being made to, provide more synchronous learning, enhance some of the instruction, but I heard from the community some different ideas, some thoughts about how to even enhance the virtual portion. So is there a way to obtain that feedback as well?
That's a great question, Nicole. And something we've struggled with this whole time is the balance between giving enough information so people know what it might look like so they can make a good decision, and then getting the information back and realizing that there's some tweaking that has to be done based on how people respond. So we are planning on giving as much context and detail as we can, and just kind of outlining the potential changes that may need to take place. I mean, that's really the extent of what we can offer at this point. And then just sort of work closely with each team and grade level to make the best decisions based on what they know that their students and families are looking for. And thank you for the suggestion about opening up a question to offer thoughts. I think that's a great thing to add to the survey. Suggestions for improvement or just thoughts. Sure that people have some ideas that would definitely be helpful to us in our planning.
And you're probably going to do this, but perhaps even just a link to that slideshow as well as a link to this return to learn would help preface it as well.
Thank you. Yep. Slideshow and this meeting. That's great. Great suggestions. Thank you.
And Nicole, we've also talked about creating a letter that details the framework, specifically at the middle school, that would go out in advance of this survey so that parents can not only get an idea of what it would look like, but be given the opportunity to have some questions answered if they have them before actually receiving the survey.
Great. And, we as the parent members can help, network in any way we can too, with just kind of our informal network. So please let us know how we can help too.
That's great. Thank you.
I just wanted to share kind of from my perspective. This is Vanessa Grum talking. My son Ryland is in 3rd grade in person, and I teach here as well. And most of my students that I teach are remote. Based on that perspective that I have between those two, I am really grateful that we're having a conversation about this and that we are possibly making some changes to get more kids in the building. A lot of students that I work with do much better if they're in person. So I'm really grateful that we have that option to maybe welcome some more friends in. And then also, I would like to encourage us as much as possible. I know it's challenging, but to try to get the kids off of the screen if they are in person as much as possible. And I say that from the perspective that my son is giving me, because he is a pretty engaged student in school, but he struggles with having to be on the screen all day long. And I think he would really benefit from some more one-to-one, not one-to-one, but face-to-face, that's the word I was looking for, instruction. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm really excited about where this is headed, and I think we can do it given all the people who are spending so much time to think through this process. So thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
And to kind of piggyback off of Vanessa, this is Paige Soule, the school librarian. Is there going to be a format for teachers to be able to talk about just some logistics? I'm like in my head just trying to think, with my library full of 4 adults and no children, where do people go? Like, what are the logistics that teachers can be able to, the avenue to talk through some of the stuff, like the movement breaks, all of that, and just like how specials are going to run. Like, what about symptoms? If a class has symptoms, where do they go?
Yeah, and so that's a great question too, because we've been in big picture planning, and once we get numbers in from these surveys, we're going to be in that type of planning, which is, what does this actually look like and how do we actualize it? And that's where your team leadership meetings are going to be important. For parents and community members, we have team leader, like a leadership team at each building. And those folks disseminate information out to grades and departments, and we're really going to be utilizing that team as well as some grade level opportunities and department opportunities to talk through specifics. But I would highly encourage the folks on this team that are staff members to start networking as well and thinking through, what might this look like? What suggestions do we have? We have an amazing team of problem solving teachers here, as you've heard on these calls all year. And they are so smart and want the best things for kids. And we have leaned on them a lot for what this could look like and how we can make this the best for kids. So I would continue down that path. But yeah, that's why the surveys are going out, because we really just need to see how many parents are even interested in this. To go to if you watch the board meeting, we definitely have a group in the community of parents who've expressed we want more live instruction. We want more kids in. And I've heard from other parents offline that, they're really nervous about another change because things have been working well for them this year. So we definitely have a variety of community opinions on this. And I would say, Vanessa, I'm feeling in your camp as an educator and a parent of a 3rd grader who's really struggling, a 5th grader who's, kind of on the fence, and a high schooler that has no plan to get in. I have that urgency as well. And I think a lot of our teachers have that urgency to make this work as best as we can for all of our kids, whatever those needs are. So, and we're small enough and flexible enough to keep trying to offer those choices. But I do want to emphasize, this is a 3rd reorganization of our entire system, and it is taxing. And these logistics that Paige is talking about are not inconsequential. This is a lot of work. And, I want to emphasize that, not because I want to, pat ourselves on the back, but I want the community to understand these are not easy shifts. And we appreciate your patience and support through this process, because we've been really good at working together and collaboratively as teacher, community, student, parent, admin, board through this together, and being, supportive and kind and patient with each other. And I want to keep that going, because that's been a great part of what we've been able to do together. So, but it is going to take a lot of work. So thanks, Paige, for that. Other thoughts?
I just want to say, just kind of going off of what you said, Dr. Leali, I'm a parent as well. And so I think that it's important, like you said, I just don't know if everybody truly understands that we've been doing this since June, right? And we're talking about possibly shifting, and it's the end of February. And I know we're not saying, no, we're not going to do this. No, we're not going to entertain that. Of course, we want to take the needs and the desires of the community and the parents who want their kids to come into school and be here. And of course, as teachers, we would love to welcome them and have them here. But like you said, when we get down to actually taking the desires and the needs and the wants of the community and the family and have to make it work with what we have here, it's just not that simple. And it does take time. And I think that the parents who want to have their kids in and they fill out this survey, I think moving forward, we have to have some policies maybe put in place about, if you want the classrooms to do more live and off Zoom, then we really need to stick to, if you're absent or you're gone, like you're absent for the day. You get your work from Google Class, and it's going to look different at every grade level as it does now. But I think that we have been very flexible because we wanted to allow, families to, if they need to be home or they need to whatever, we've been very flexible. Like you said, other districts are not. And I just think for consistency, and I think for the teachers who want to close the lids and be able to do that, we have to have some sort of policy about if you're home for whatever reason. And if you're planning on maybe in and out in it, then you have to go to remote. And then I think just there is going to be a lot of shifting, and parents just have to be okay with shifting teachers, because I'm thinking about getting down to those logistics. And I know what you guys in the administration go through with planning and moving in sections. We're very small. Like, just like Paige was thinking, we're kind of out of room as it is. So it's like stressful to think about, where are we moving classes if someone does get sick? Where are we putting classes if we need to add a section? We're just kind of full. And I'm saying, we'll do it. You guys are amazing at figuring it out. But again, it takes time, and we need to be patient, and we need to maybe put some different policies in place about the in and out, because that is a huge hurdle to us being able to just close the lids. And we need to take a step back and look at that platform. What do we want those kids to do? If you want them to be remote, like, it might be reorganizing a lot of grade levels, at least at the elementary school. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Thank you, Michelle. Yep. And I do want to emphasize that what we're talking about is for the end of this year. Our administrative team is already planning for fall. That looks different than what we're talking about. What we're thinking about in fall is a return to a much more normal and traditional situation. We will still probably have to have that remote piece in place, but when we open up, we're opening up much more normally than we are now. What we're talking about is a third shift just for this school year. I just want to make sure I'm clarifying that the fall planning is different. And we've been engaged in that for quite some time.
If I could add two things to that, one being that a shift to this third phase would, though, enable us to troubleshoot and tweak a model that could potentially be then in place at the start of the school year next year in the fall. So that there's an advantage that I see in doing that work. The other thing that I think, considering the timing, is worth mentioning is that we're still uncertain about what standardized assessment is going to look like. And we've got some guidance coming our way, we expect, in terms of implementation of IAR testing. And all of those are also factors that need to be taken into account. And so we're on it. We just don't have specifics about what Illinois State Board of Education is going to require of its districts to, in terms of implementation of IAR.
Yeah, right now there's no waiver for giving the assessment. There may be some waivers for what that means for our district in terms of accountability. So we're still working through that. But as you may or may not know, families of kids older than third grade, it's days of testing hitting us in March and April. So we're working through it.
And as of right now, not something that can be done remotely. So those are all the things that have to be built into our plans.
Thanks for bringing that up, Nate.
I just have a quick thing. First of all, I appreciate everybody being willing to have this conversation, and I appreciate our admin team, especially for leading through and being willing to have a different experience. You know, as a board member, I've obviously heard from people on various sides of this issue, and as a parent, I've had kids at home most of the year and in school part of the year, and I'm appreciative for both of those experiences. Both of my kids have great teachers this year. I guess my question is one of cost benefit. And I know that as a board member, I would want to know from teachers, from classroom teachers who have been doing this all year, you know, there are some great things about shifting the model again and getting more students in and getting more students into more kind of live instructional model. There are also some opportunity costs to that. And I don't know the answer. So I'd love, if it's now or later or something, I would just love some perspective on, like, do the benefits outweigh the costs? And you know, there will be students impacted because they might have to switch classes, because they might, you know, parents might not be comfortable with students being less than 6 feet away. And I just think this late into the year with another disruption, I just want to make sure that I have a good understanding of do those, and I know you're thinking about this, but you know, I don't know that the answer is do the cost, do the benefits outweigh the cost? So if there's any perspective on that, I would love to hear it now or in a future session, if it requires some thought. It's just something that I've been ruminating on. So I appreciate
the question. And I think the answer is we're not sure, and it may depend. You know, so I think Nate has brought up some good points about the ability of our middle school to troubleshoot and get kinks out of the way before we open up in the fall. That is a tremendous benefit. They've been on a very different model. You know, elementary shifts are going to be a lot, you know, potentially a lot. And you're right. Any kind of disruption, there's an implementation dip. I mean, that's research proven. So whenever you shift, you're going to have a transition period. You're going to have a dip in routine. You're not going to have those routines anymore. You're going to have to try to do some additional work to get that up and going, relationship building if necessary. So yeah, I mean, that is a very valid question. And on the other side of the coin, we have students who are struggling. And so I don't, you know, as a parent, what is the cost benefit for my own child? I'm always going to think that it's beneficial for my child to get more of what I need for them or what I know they need. And I'm sure that all of our parents would feel that way about their own children. So I think it's a great question. I don't know that it can be quantified, but I want to open it up to other people for your perspective too.
I think it's important to add in, and I know we're getting close to 9:45 and students will be arriving at elementary school soon. So for our teachers who have to log off, please do so. And this will be recorded, which is why I think it's important to share if families are referring back to it. Andy, your question, when I think about like what additional costs come with this, I mean, there's little things that I think about, but I think it might be helpful, and I'm going to try to speak through it quickly again, but the shifts that would occur over here, again, are different at each grade level. So we have some rooms now that have room for students. So if a student is remote and the family is interested in that child coming in person, the adjustment would simply be they're relocating from home to school. We have other sections, specifically at the kindergarten, first grade, and fifth grade level, even third, where the rooms are full at this time with the 6-foot distancing guideline. If we are able to reduce that, we can fit more students in. But if I'm a third grader and I'm remote in a fully remote third grade section, the option is either that third grader joins an in-person section and is changing teacher, or The remote teacher is then occupying a classroom and shifting to a blended model, which is an approach that we took during this phase 2, if that makes sense. So we have teachers that have been teaching remotely in offices all year long, and that has been working really well. If we want to preserve the teacher placement, that teacher, I don't want to oversimplify this because it is a change for the teacher to come into a classroom, some of the students to be in person, and then some to remain at home. It can disrupt the learning environment just in the sense that people are in different places. So I just want to kind of make that clear. Also, if we're able to reduce the distancing at this time, our classrooms on the second floor at the elementary school are what I might call a double room. So there's 2 classrooms, there's a wall in the middle that can open, and we have opened that wall. So for some of our first grade sections, our third grade sections, and some fourth grade sections, we have double rooms. If we can reduce the distancing, we can pull the students into one classroom, close the wall, and we do have an available space. Again, that is an adjustment from where we've been. They are occupying a majority of those 2 classrooms, being distanced 6 feet. But that is one option to create some additional space in that building and still have relocation spaces. If we do that, there's another room for lunch duty that we would need to find someone to assume that piece, but that feels minimal compared to the opportunity it could create for kids to come in. So sorry for a lot there, but I do think sharing that is really kind of an important piece when it comes to elementary school.
Thanks, Kelly. And I know you need to run. Go ahead, Audrey.
Andy, I was just going to say, Kelly and I are looking at how many kids we have in right now and what our wait list looks like. And based on that, it looks like we could really accommodate a few kids here and there at different grade levels with very little adjustments. If we get survey results that the numbers are much different, then that would be more change and such. But, you know, if we can get by with adding a few kids here and there at each of the grade levels, we really won't need to adjust much other than just adding a couple more kids, which should be, you know, not a big deal. So it really depends on those numbers. But as far as like supplies and such, Jay really has us stocked up on, you know, everything. We have extra sneeze guards if we need to add more seats. We already have a lot of the foundational, as far as like buildings and grounds, like, you know, materials and such that it's not like we would need a whole nother purchase order or anything like that. I think we're pretty set as far as that, you know, financial cost goes.
Thanks, Audrey.
Can I just, my another concern, I'm sorry. I don't want to sound like I'm totally against everything. It's not that. I'm concerned just about the nurses. I feel like we'd have to add maybe another, I know we added help at our school. I just feel like if we're looking at reducing the distance, then that kind of opens up, which fine, if somebody tests positive, then that kind of turns into a big contact trace. You know, it's a lot of work on our nurses, and we don't want them to go anywhere or leave us if we burn them out. And so I don't know, cost wise, if you're, you know, can we add more help for them?
Yeah,
for the rest of this year?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. We have talked about health clerks, and we do have 3 full-time nurses right now, which is great. And we would be talking to our nurses about what they need for sure. The contact tracing, a lot of that would depend on our teachers keeping very close records of seating charts. That's really what we would need in terms of that. And then obviously the communication piece is super heavy on the nurses in terms of, you know, just answering parent questions and interfacing there. So it's a good point.
I was just going to also say that I know the way that some of the grade levels have organized curriculum, teachers are pre-recording videos for different lessons. And so like, I'm just thinking again of Ryland, my son in 3rd grade, and he knows the other 3rd grade teachers because he's been taught by them throughout the year via pre-recorded videos. So I just think that's something to keep in mind when we say like receiving a new teacher or changing teachers. It actually, I know there is definitely a change to that, but I don't think it's somebody that's completely brand new to them because they have been receiving instruction from them in certain ways in certain grade levels, not across the school district. So I just wanted to put that out there.
It's a great point. And I do want to point out that even though teacher changes are upsetting, they're usually upsetting for everyone. And the reason for that is because everyone loves their teacher, which means all of our teachers are amazing. And so when you think about it in that way, you're right. You know, all of our teachers care about all of our kids, and all of our kids form amazing relationships with all of our teachers. And so that's a great point to bring up. Anything else? So there's only one other question that hasn't been addressed that I know that was going to be asked today, which is a potential start. So when would we be able to do all this? I don't exactly know. I know it would be after spring break, because we are trying to, number one, gather information, number two, do a lot of planning, and number three, get our teachers vaccinated and feeling safe in our schools before we were to shift down to the 6 feet. So we're looking at early April as a start. I know that, folks know that some other districts are moving in this direction. Some other districts have announced they're going to stay put for the rest of the year and just plan for fall. As we've been since last March, every district is in a different spot. So it's very, very difficult to compare how districts are handling it and what decisions they're making, because we just all have a very different set of variables that we're working with. And I can tell you, I still talk to every superintendent every week. I still talk to the Lake County Health Department twice a week. All of that is still in place. And even with all that articulation and all that time talking and planning and asking and challenging each other, everyone still winds up in a pretty different spot just based on what they need to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I have always felt proud of what the plan that we made, what we've been able to do this whole year. I'm incredibly proud of our faculty and staff for how resilient and adaptive and positive and amazing they've been through this. Certainly my administrative team, our community, all of us have really pulled together to make this work in the best way that we could. And I'm also proud that we continue to talk about how we can get better, because in a normal year, we'd want to always do that. We're always doing that. That's how we think in education. When you know better, you do better. And so as we've learned about what we're doing now, as we've learned about this virus, as the variables have changed, we've continued to try to stay with it and keep moving and keep making ourselves better. And that is something that I'm really impressed with in Lake Bluff. It's amazing. So, and this group, couldn't be more grateful for you. The great suggestions, great thoughts, great feedback. I know you're having conversations out there. I know people ask you questions. Nicole, I appreciate you thinking through this. How can this group be an ambassador or be, answering questions or utilizing networks? This is what this is for. So encourage anyone that has questions or thoughts to email. My door's open. Our administrative team's door is open. Our board members are listening. We're all here listening and wanting to do what's right for kids. So,
Lisa, sorry, you talked about the timeline of April. Can you talk about the timeline of, okay, we know this many kids want to come in. We know that if we want to add more buses or add more kids to the buses, like all those, like, what are those, like, how is it those steps going to fall?
Depends on when we get back from our survey.
So
the
it'll
first
just
step
look
is the
like
survey.
dominoes going down,
Yep.
down, down.
Yep. And as we get closer to, once we get that data and we kind of see how many dominoes are going to fall, to Audrey's point, it may not fall. There might not be a lot. And we might be able to do something a little like right after spring break. But if our surveys get, a result back that indicates a much bigger change, then we may have to propose a little bit later, giving us some more time. So a lot of this depends on what we get back from our community. So the goal right now is to get really as much context as we can out to folks to read and digest and communicate the information that we're presenting so that people feel like as solid as they can about filling out the survey. And then if we feel like we really have some good numbers, people are responsive and give us the information quickly, it'll be a quick turnaround. It's not going to be a 2-week survey. It's going to be like 3 days. And I feel like sometimes that's better. For me as a parent, when I get a survey, if they tell me it's due in 2 days, I'll do it right then. If they tell me I have 2 weeks, sometimes I forget about it. So I think if we do a quick turnaround, we get that information, we start planning based on what we think we might need to do, we'll have a much better idea of when we might be able to implement this.
Can I say one more thing? Oh, sorry, Ann. The parent volunteers.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully that will still continue. PTO.
Yeah, we love our parent volunteers. Thank you, PTO. I don't know
Yes.
if Gary's still on the call. We've
Yes.
had parent volunteers come in to help with breaks and lunch supervision, and we could not be more grateful. Thank
And
you,
we
PTO.
can't continue without, I think without them, they've been so helpful. So
Thank you, Michelle.
yeah.
And
Just to kind of piggyback off what Michelle had said earlier, I think that the administrative team has been phenomenal in trying to accommodate families as the process has gone on and people have changed their mind, whether they're coming in or going out. I think if that's not, flexibility is not going to be offered, it should be made very clear to the parents when they take the survey, like the decision you make here is the one that we're going to have to stick with. If that is the thing, I know once you guys kind of redo the whole schedule and then they're like, well, that does sound like a good idea. I'd like my kid to come in, or no, thank you. My kid's going to go out. So I think maybe if that is going to be an issue, that should be spelled out really clearly for parents, because I don't know that the flexibility will be as it's such an option in this coming.
I think you're right. I think that's a great point, and I think you've been in the room for some of those conversations, because that is how it sounds sometimes. Like, that's not what I thought it would be. Yeah, I appreciate that, Anne. Anybody else?
I guess, Dr. Liali, I just, and I think the conversation has long moved away, but I've sort of been stewing on a few thoughts that I have just regarding, there is a population of students that we have at Lake Bluff who I believe the pandemic has really, it looks different for all families. And there are some families that we work with where fear is a real issue, and they will choose to probably keep their kids home for the rest of the year, although we'd love to see all these kids come back. And I think it's important that we remember that these families are making a choice. Priorities are different for every single family in every single community. And I'm feeling like if we're going to shift completely, I'm hearing a lot of talk about how great the in-person is going to be. And for many families, the remote teaching has been amazing. There's been such fidelity. These teachers have worked so hard. If we are now asking some of these remote teachers to change, I worry for some students where the teaching has been done in an amazing way and the families are going to choose to stay home, that with all this shifting, they're going to kind of get lost in the shuffle of the teachers wanting to do this amazing off Zoom, great instruction in person. I feel like I just want to make sure it's equitable for the kiddos that are going to remain home for the year. It's feeling like the teachers are going to be very overwhelmed, and I know they're going to be amazing all over, but we will have kids that choose to stay home for the year. And I think we need to honor that and, can continue to do with fidelity what we've been doing all year for these families, although it's not best case scenario. This isn't a best case scenario year. We're in a pandemic. So I'm feeling like a year in, some of that pandemic fatigue is sort of, and the weather's going to get nice. And I feel like we still need to remember this is a pandemic. The kids won't be vaccinated and there will be fear. Medical care looks very different for many kiddos in our district. So, and families are in very different situations. So I just don't want to lose sight of that. So thank you. Sorry.
John, I 100% appreciate you bringing that up. And I hear you. And we want to take care of all of our kids. That will be a priority for us, which is why that remote platform is not going away entirely, because we need it to connect all our kids and our community together. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, folks, it's 10:01. I've taken double the time that I said I would take. I appreciate your time with me today. I appreciate your time with the team. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your thoughts. As always, email, call, let us know if you have anything else you want to think through. We appreciate you.
Thank you.